use 500.
Yep.
Whenever you want to stimulate the silica process, use 501.
Yep.
So I think there's a big thing about using 500 in the autumn to stimulate the soil digestion that's taking place. And I think there's also a reason to use it, like this year, I've been using it in October.
500.
Yep.
Yep.
Because you're wanting to stimulate that watery process as you're going into the drought. So it's actually your drought resistant remedy is the 500. So, you know, I think that's the point. It's about seeing both processes separately. You know, that you've got this calcium process that's got two sides to it. One is stimulating the soil and the other is actually making the plants bigger, fatter. And the silica process is actually ripening your plants and getting them out of the ground in the springtime. You know, they're your two processes that you're trying to work with. And, you know, rather than just seeing them as a pushing and a pulling thing, actually be aware of which part of which cycle you're wanting to work with. Because, yeah, it's a fourfold game, not a twofold game.
And so you have the ability to only ever stimulate and not like, is there like a way of not stimulating?
Well, use it in the autumn. Use it in the autumn in a way to stimulate the soil processes.
Yeah.
500 is going to stimulate stuff because that's what the metabolic process is. It sort of activates and cooks and stimulates.
So is there ever any case where you've got too much stimulation and you want to like tone it down? You can't exactly put 502 on, can you?
Well, the 501, the silica process, will sort of help to push that back.
Yep, okay.
You know,
so they do kind of like,
it.
the other one will kind of work against the other.
They do. They both work against each other.
You're considering them independently, but they...
If you use silica, like using both in the autumn, and you're going to be sort of stimulating the soil process while at the same time dragging in the silica process. And if you use them both in the spring, you're going to be stimulating both the actual mass production and the upward growth. So there's a lot to be said for doing that.
Right.
And there's a point of be conscious though that your 500 is working with vegetative growth. That's what it will do, which is vegetative. And so you've got to be a bit careful if you try to ripen something. You don't want to go starting throwing it 500 on.
Yep.
You know, but as I said, using 500 this year in October, late October coming into November, might be a really good idea if you're growing a fruit crop that's going to be harvested in March and we're coming into a drought. Then using 500 later is a good thing because it will help to keep the moisture going in your plant longer.
I don't feel like I asked that question very well. Like, so say you don't want the vegetative growth,
right?
And you can not put the 500 on.
Yeah, of course.
But say you really don't want that vegetative growth. Is just not putting it on going to be enough? Like, is there a way to almost reverse that effect?
Yeah, more 500, yeah. 501, sorry, more silica.
Yeah. So
silica will actually contract your plant down to nothing.
Cool.
I had a guy in Chile and he used 501 every 10 days through his grape season and he grew about that much vine and, not many grapes, but he won the best Pinot Noir in Chile that year.
Really?
Yeah. And,
every 10 days.
Every 10 days. A little bit is good, but a lot must be really better. And so he shrunk the whole thing, and the leaves only get this big, but the flavours are intense and everything like that. But you really shrink your mass, there's no doubt about it.
He only had one bottle of wine.
Yeah, well, that's right. There wasn't a lot of it.
Can you also do it at a certain time of the moon? Preparations?
Well, again, that's another sort of discussion really as to when you're going to do it. And I think a good, especially with 501, you know, the constellation type is a really good time to do it. So if you're wanting fruit, then you do it on a fire constellation. If you're wanting leaf, like if you're growing lettuce, you want to do it on a leaf constellation. Flowers on an air constellation, and root
Garlic?
crops on a... Well, garlic is an interesting one.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's a swollen stem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually a fruiting process that you're trying to drag down into not the root.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, that. And so you can start looking at the plant, you know, in the nerve sense and the metabolic and so on, where in astrology we have these things called cardinal, fixed and mutable.
Oh,
So fixed is your nerve sense, mutable is the rhythmic, and then cardinal is the metabolic. And so if you're wanting to get a fruiting process and drag it down towards the root, then fixed fire. And so that's Leo. So the question is how good would it be to spray 501 in Leo? But otherwise, you know, just doing the constellation for your silica is good. You know, there's quite a culture around of Moon-Saturn opposition, but you've got to realise that that's a very contractive constellation. You know, that causes contraction. And so does the 501 cause contraction. And so while there might be something to be said about doing that early in the season to harden up your plants so that they'll cope with the drought better, so sow your seed at Moon-Saturn opposition rather than full moon, for example, so you get a stockier plant. And then when the plants you know, are at the third, fourth leaf stage, you can give them another dose just to sort of harden them up. But you know, after that, if you're coming into a dry season, then you're going to find that 501 of Moon-Saturn opposition is going to be far too hard. And you know, contract the plant, even burn the plant. So, you know, I think it's important to realise that contractiveness, and therefore it's not good to just do it always at Moon-Saturn opposition. Yeah. But using 501 on the constellations...
More important than ascending, descending?
Well, yeah. For me, I do the constellations rather than that.